Okay, here we go. A little more reading of this incredible book, Billy's Back. When I first started reading this, I didn't know if this was true or not, and the more I read of the 666-page book that this comes from, the more I believed it's probably what happened. Okay. Can you see why George later said their love is sleeping? While my guitar gently weeps, he says, our love is sleeping. He got it from Paul's Good Night. We recorded John's Good Night and also my Golden Slumbers with that in mind. Good Night intentionally follows John's chaotic Revolutionary 9, just as Paul's final resting peace would follow his miserable end. John wrote it as far as Ringo sang, but wanted a serene, harmonious Hollywood ending, which he asked George Martin to score for him. George scored the end and then hired 30 session musicians for his orchestra, another for the harp, and a chorus of 4 boys and 4 girls. On Golden Slumber, I Too Had Help. That song, recorded 1 year later than John's, was inspired by a ballad written by Thomas Dekker from 1572. He lived till 1632, Thomas Dekker. Having respected Paul Simon's work adapting Richie Cory, which is a song, by Edwin Arlington Robinson, who lived from 1869 to 1935, I decided that maybe I would do the same. Almost all the words are Dekker's. Only 3 months before Paul Simon's lyrics, reworking Robinson's, was released, the Byrds had a big hit adapting King Solomon's lyrics from Ecclesiastes. Turn, 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 to every day, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, and a time to every something under heaven. I think it's every moment under heaven. Time to build up, a time to break down. Yeah, that's a good song. I got chills when I listened to that one day back in the 80s. I'm sure I listened to it much in the 70s too, but I really listened to the lyrics in the 80s because I was at an age where I was becoming a lyricist and I was writing poetry and stuff. Okay, anyway. Answering Paul's Get It Straight or Say Good Night, John's Good Night, and my song Golden Slumber suggested not only Paul's death, but also that we could not work it out and get it straight. Keeping both songs as literal sweet dream lullabies, but also continuing what we wanted all of you to know about Paul. Each of these songs worked on different levels. John was saying goodnight to our sleeping Beatle love and to Paul, but also used the song as a lullaby for Julian. Golden Slumbers, Until I Gave It a New Tune, was already a lullaby, but I provided the context of Paul's love. I did it as one song with Carry That Weight. That song was about the heavy burden I had with my Paul role. Not that I resented Paul for working it out for me, but that I missed being myself, in peace, without all the conflict and hassle of dealing with John's grief and pain. Using Dekker's poetic words to describe Paul's eternal snooze, his sleep of death, I led right into the weighty burden that his death had placed on me. As Dekker had it, quote, sleep, pretty wantons, do not cry, and I will sing a lullaby. Wantons. I didn't know it said wantons. I said wontons. It's the same. Wantons and wontons is, I think, the same spelling. But wantons is someone who's wanting. Okay. I thought of myself going on in Paul's place while he slept. and singing to him about wanting to give it up and go home. So I added Carry That Weight. In that song, I had all four of us in the band singing the message to me that I needed to accept. Boy, you're gonna carry that weight a long time. So he carried it from 66 all the way until he published this book in 2009. Man, that's a long freaking time to carry that weight. 66, 76, 86, 96, 2006. 43 years he carried that weight before he published this book. Wow. But that is not all we sang. Listen and hear. Quote, Paul, you're going to carry that weight. So they do overdubbings where they change the words to a lot of the songs, but it's only in the overdubbings. And they write on that's why the first album that ever in history of rock and roll ever had the lyrics on the album was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. After that, other people started to put the lyrics on the albums. But the reason they did that is because they wanted you to think that they were saying certain things that actually, if you listen to the song, they weren't saying. In the background dubbing, they were actually saying what they really wanted you to know. Anyway, I'll get into that later, but that's the first time lyrics were ever printed on an album, because that's right after Paul McCartney died, and they wanted you to know that Paul McCartney died, and they put the lyrics there so you can listen and read that they're saying something different at a few points, so you can know that that's what they're really trying to tell you. But their publicists wouldn't allow them to put the actual lyrics, so they would have known they were giving out too many secrets and probably killed them before they killed one of them. Okay, anyway, we'll get into that later. Listen and hear, Paul, you're going to carry that weight. I have had far better times since dissolving the Beatles, but still realize that although most of the weight has been lifted off of me and the band's disillusion, much of Paul McCartney's burden remains. After I had worked for a long time to carry Paul's burden, I wrote, I've carried that weight. I will include all of those lyrics in the final chapter of this book of secrets. That's in the 666 page book, which I can't find now, so I'm going to have to go buy it again if I get enough comments and likes and shares on these videos. And I'll read the ones that are not contained in this book in that section. Singing with Jay-Z moved me to write, record, and perform it as a hip-hop. Excuse me. I used my neti pot this morning. I didn't use it yesterday. I thought, but I did not have the energy for it to come out right. I thought I'd kick it out to me so that one of you could cover it. Okay, so he puts a bunch of songs at the end, last chapter of the 666 page book, where you can use those lyrics and write your own songs, because they're having a contest. I wrote my own song and I sent it in, but I didn't get any word on it. But it wasn't based on those lyrics. It was called The Death of William Wallace Campbell, and you can see that on YouTube. It should have millions of views, but of course they've been after I got to 1 million views on my channel, they started shadow banning everything I do, and I barely get 25 views on any video I do anymore. So I'm starting to put everything on Rumble because YouTube is just too censored. Okay. It will include all of those lyrics in the final chapter of the Book of Secrets. I already read that. I thought I'd kick it to you to... Okay. I might enjoy doing that song with one of you. Okay, so if one of you win the song competition, I'm going to look at those lyrics again. I'm going to try to write a song. I tried, but they weren't really... I would have to rewrite them, change the lyrics a lot to get them into a song. Which is fine, because a lot of people do that when they get lyrics. They have to change it for the rhythm of the song. And use a few other words that are similar meaning. In Paul's song, his own urgency also gives us all words to live by. Life is very short and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friends. I have always thought that it's a crime. Okay, you know what I mean? I think so too. Once again, try to see it my way. His way was shown to be true. Jim and others claim that up until Paul's died, he made it come true as a self-fulfilling prophecy. I see that they may be right. The deal that Paul worked out helped me more than it did him. I got out of the worst of it. Yeah. Okay, the next chapter, chapter 4, it's called Paul's Girls. Singling out two of Paul's children may give you the impression that they were all he had. They were not. Only these two are the ones I can be certain of. In this life, Paul never learned of most of them. Roaming around and having more opportunity than most guys could imagine, while not taking any responsibility for it, and being the world's most eligible bachelor, Paul could conceivably have had young children all over the world by the time he was released in 1966. So, how many Bob Marley, 17 or 18 kids to 15 different women, all while being married to the first woman that cheated on him and had a kid that he raised as his own kid? Pretty amazing, huh? Okay, Brian Epstein paid Anita Cochran £5,000 to not say Paul fathered her son, Philip Paul Cochran. Dead Kennedys, yeah! California, Uber Alice. I love when you hear a song like that you haven't heard since your childhood. Okay, I was like thinking, this guy's radio's too loud. I can't hear myself think. But then I realized it's California, Uber Alice. What's the first version of that was, I am Emperor Jerry Brown. I wear a smile and never frown. Soon I will be president. Oh, Governor Jerry Brown. I am Governor Ronald Reagan. That's what was the first version. He remade it for Jerry Brown. Soon I will be president, it said in that first one when he was governor. And he became president. Whoa, was that foretold before it happened? I can't remember. Brian Epstein paid Anita Cochran £5,000 to not say Paul fathered her son, Philip Paul Cochran, under circumstances that suggested a convincingly high probability. Many others also made claims of the Beatles impregnating them. However, most of it was not established beyond all question. I do not know for certain how many children John, Paul, George, or Ringo ever fathered. This is the new Paul McCartney talking, otherwise known as Billy Shears. They do not know either. Well, at least none could know in this lifetime. From what I have heard, none of them respected women enough to take paternity seriously. At least none did in Paul's lifetime. They nestled up with many birds before they settled down to roost permanently. I confess I was the same way once I took over Paul's part. Being in the greatest show on earth put us at an advantage with women. There were many gorgeous women who would do anything to get close to us. 2 daughters that I know for sure sprang from Paul are discussed in this chapter. But first, let me explain that since Paul never did take full responsibility for his children, I feel for them and see how it clearly reflects poorly on Paul. But it is not my problem. It is tragic to be sure. However, it is not my predicament. I do not want to sound callous about it. I am sorry for Paul's indiscretions. I am sorry he did not accept his rightful responsibility for it once his children came along. It is sad, but it happens. I want no part of it. I wish his children would not contact me. I am finally using this chapter to tell them that I regret what they have gone through without a father, but I am not visiting them or paying them. Paul was not mature enough to follow up with responsibility. In that respect, I am not Paul. He just goes by the Paul McCartney name because that's his stage name. As a teenage rocker, when Paul, with our future Beatles, was in the Quarrymen playing in the then New Cavern Club, Paul met, dated, and impregnated Monique Lavalier, Levallier. She lived from 1945 to 1999. So she was about late teens when, I guess, they got hooked up. Monique was a young makeup artist working in London, maybe 19 years old. I didn't do the math, but it was 62 or so, and she was born in 45, so she couldn't have been 20 yet. Okay. As always, when he told Paul that she was having his baby, he chose to discontinue their relationship. Monique, brokenhearted and embarrassed, returned to her home in Paris, France. Monique had the baby girl on 5 April of 1960. Wow, this is so she was only 17, which was normal. I mean, most early in the 19th century, pregnancies were happened between the age of 14 and 19. Most people in most cultures got after puberty. That's when they got married, because that's when they can make babies. So my daughter, some people, because they took vaccines that made them start their period very early in life, could have started much earlier than 14. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Without Paul, she named the infant Michelle. Paul knew of her, but did not pursue his parental role, letting things drop partly because Paul, a teenage quarryman, so he was also a teenager, did not have the means to give due parental support. Monique went on without Paul. However, by Michelle's 5th birthday, the Beatles rocked the whole planet. That is the year Paul became a millionaire. Monique put a picture in an envelope and mailed it to him. On the back, she wrote, "Paul, look at your beautiful little daughter. Now she is 5 years old." I'm sorry to cry. My daughter left me last time to go back to Japan when she was 6. So I can imagine seeing his daughter for the first time at 5 years old. I lived with her till she was 4. And then she moved back for 3 months when she was 6. And then I saw her just last week when she's almost 11. So it's touching. So he wrote that song, Michelle, for his 5-year-old daughter. And I can imagine I would do the same thing if I was so inspired. I should write a Rosina song. Michelle would like to meet your father. So the postcard says, "Paul, look at your beautiful little daughter. Now she is 5 years old. Michelle would like to meet her father." And that's all he's put. Love, Monique. And that's all. I found this picture a year and a half later when I went through all of Paul's stuff, because he moved into Paul's house. He assumed the Fool on the Hill role. That's why he calls himself the Fool on the Hill, the man with 1,000 voices, because he used to do overdubbing in the studios, and he used to be able to copy anyone's voice, and that's why they hired him to be the next Beatle. Okay. Monique took the picture on 5 April of 1965 and mailed it from Paris on the 17th. Paul was touched but reluctant. Using the French skills of Mrs. Ivan Vaughan, wife of an old Quarryman bandmate, Paul's lyrics for Michelle included some of his little girl's native language. based on the picture he had received of his 5-year-old daughter, he wrote Michelle. We see from his lyrics that he had an intention of connecting with her later. If you will read the words, you will see that the whole song directly acknowledges her as his own. Michelle, my belle, my Michelle. The song suggests his belief that they would ultimately in time connect. It is kind of sad thinking of his little French daughter eventually learning this song of hope. Michelle, I'll get to you somehow. Until I do, I'm telling you so you'll understand. Michelle, my belle, sont les mots qui vont très bien ensemble. Which means these are words that go together well in French. That it is his daughter. Wow, what a beautiful thing. Sorry, I just saw my daughter last week, and I'm still... For a week, I saw her with my wife, and they both went back to Japan, and I begged them to come back to the U.S. in a year from now once she stops her medications for her vaccine injury, which should be a year from now if they can come for a year, and they're going to think about it. My daughter doesn't want to miss her first year of junior high school, but she's going to think about it, so we'll see. It's a hard time for kids when they start a new school and everything that year. The hard rub is that we never know when life will slow down enough to deal with all of those things on our to-do list. The picture was mailed to him in late April. In May, he was working on French tunes. Early on, Paul saw his friend, the French teacher, to get words to sing in Michelle's language so that she would understand. Paul began recording the song at EMI Studios on 17th of June. It was only 2 months from the picture's postmark. They did more with the song on 12 October and 11 November to include it on their Rubber Soul album released 3 December of 1965. I hate the way British write the date before the month because it confuses the hell out of me. I would wish they would December 3rd. But in most cultures they do, because you always put smaller to larger. What's larger, a day or a month? A day's larger. I mean, a month's larger, so you always put that after. You go smaller to larger. So it should be day, month, year, but we, in this country, for some stupid reason, put month, day, year, which is done in no other culture. So I shouldn't be mad at them. It's just we like to just change everything, fuck up calendars. The Julian calendar fucked up all the real calendars of all cultures, which were all lunar calendars, which all had 13 months because there's 13 moons every year. Anyway, we won't go into that. I've gone into that in a million videos. You can go back and watch those on my YouTube channel until they take them down, because they keep taking down videos, which is why I don't put much on there anymore. Okay, so 12 October and November they did this. Okay, as far as I can tell, Paul still could not make room in his busy life for his daughter by the time he died on 11 September of 1966. I have heard that Michelle McCartney is a fine bass player in Los Angeles. She has tried to contact me. So thinking that the new Paul McCartney is the old Paul McCartney, she may, unless she reads this book or she gets all the clues from all the other books that have been written about him, she may realize that her dad died in 1966. Okay. Even though I feel for her, what could I say? In this novel, I say quite a bit that I cannot in the legally troublesome world of nonfiction. I love this one, which is reason why I'm writing a fiction book, which is really nonfiction, but I'm calling it fiction the same reason this was, so I can avoid lawsuits. Were I to meet her, I could not admit that Paul has been laid to rest, and yet I cannot say that I am her father either. That would be a terrible lie. If she ever wants to meet someone who knew her father, the best choice would be Mike, Paul's brother. Are you understanding, Michelle? Mike also cannot admit that Paul has died, but can tell you nice things about him if that is what you would like to know. However, Michelle, if what you want to do is to find out how Paul felt about you, replay your song. It is what he left to you. He said the song had been written years earlier because everyone knew he was in love with Jane. The child was hush hush, but it wasn't written years before. Erika Huber was a young girl Paul met in Hamburg, Germany. Her father owned a club on the Goose Freiheit. Grosse Freiheit, whatever that is. It's an avenue. Grosse, I think, is a street or something, or a boulevard or something. And so had connections. Erica became employed as a waitress in one of the clubs in that area. That is where she met Paul in August of 1960. They hit it off right away and were sexually intimate. She believed that they would be married. With the Beatles' intense performance schedule not leaving much time to socialize, Paul was glad to have a steady date. Paul dated Erica for about a year and a half, off and on, when their child was finally conceived in March of 1962. Okay, saying again, as always, that it would interfere with his career, but wanting to continue getting it on with Erica, Paul urged her to abort the child. She refused. She urged him, if he loved her, to marry her to raise their child together. But it became obvious that Paul did not really love her, even though he had told her that he did. She felt that he had used her. The hurtful breakup that ensued resembled that of Monique, and was the same pattern with others who would not abort. On 19 December 1962, Bettina Hibberts was born, 12 days before the Beatles' last Hamburg gig. Under pressure later from the government in West Germany, Paul agreed to pay child support. When reared without a father, Bettina was never told her father's identity until her confirmation as a teenager. It was a very exciting revelation to her. She adored the Beatles and especially loved Paul. She had never imagined that she was his daughter. Of course, by the time Bettina found out, he was long gone. Now, in her mind, I am her father. She too wants contact, which is clearly a bad idea. Paul could have chosen to will part of his fortune to Bettina, but he did not. He wrote out a whole list of everyone he wanted to receive an inheritance. She was not one of them. He did not say why. The reason can only be guessed at. Here is my shot at it. He did not know her or any of his children. He funded her child support needs against his own will. Those payments that he agreed to, I became legally obligated to pay until the prescribed year expired. That much he did plan for. He did not intend to ever renege on it. I kept that commitment to his child and paid the support once I learned of it. But Paul did not mean any harm or benefit to her who was a stranger to him. To be a father in the best sense, it is not enough to have merely donated the sperm. A true father goes on fathering for as many years as he remains a father. There was no bonding there at all. Beyond conception, Paul never fathered Bettina. She wanted a father. When she was told of Paul, she pursued me, wanting me to be her father, mistakenly assuming that I was him. That is an easy mistake to make. It happens all the time. Finally, when Bettina turned 20 years old, back in 1982, she filed a paternity suit to get money. That put me in quite a predicament. I did not want to be part of it, but had no choice. And I underline this part, so it must be important. All of the enormously negative consequences for me breaking the non-disclosure agreement are worse than ridiculous. Without going into it, there is no way I would possibly break that agreement. That is actually why I am cautious to preserve the novel status of this revealing book. In fiction, such as a song, poem, or novel, I can say anything that does not violate the agreement. But in straight communication, such as in an interview or on a witness stand, I am obliged to be silent about having any knowledge of Paul's death. That's why he wrote this as historical fiction, even though it's factual. I cannot say, quote, I know nothing of Paul's death, unquote. Instead, I am committed to only speak of it as though it were my own. I say, quote, no, I am not dead, end quote. So every time he's asked that on an interview, did Paul McCartney die in 1966? He always says, no, I am not dead. That's all he says, because that's all he could say. Otherwise, he's going to break disclosure agreements. Owing to that, non-disclosure agreements, which he's going to be sued massively, and he's probably going to lose all of his money that he got under the name Paul, and probably be taken to jail for impersonation and all kinds of other stuff. So he has to remain silent, except in this one book, 666 pages, called The Memoirs of Billy Shears. Owing to that extraordinary obligation for me to remain silent about Paul's death, and owing to the negative consequences for breaking that agreement, I am put in an awkward position when it comes to his children. When I was hauled into court responding to Bettina's claims that I was her father, it was enormously frustrating. I wanted to explain it all, but could not. Some say I should pay up out of respect for Paul, but it was Paul himself who set this whole thing up. He is the one who agreed only to the required support payments. I am honoring him by doing exactly as he instructed. Subpoenaing me there for the paternal suit left me no choice but to play along. Giving the evidence required by the court, I allowed a blood draw to prove my DNA from my left arm. At the court appearance to identify Bettina's father, I proved that it could not be me. Even with the irrefutable DNA evidence, Paul and Erica's long-term relationship had been so clearly established, and Erica's fidelity to Paul so well known, that the court ruled that I must be the father of Bettina. Plainly, Erica was no slut. She was not sleeping with other guys while giving her all to Paul. The court could see that was true. I had to be the father. No matter how many character witnesses lined up and swore that faithful Erica had never been with another man, it should not have mattered, since my DNA does not have a parental match. It was under that argument that I appealed the decision and finally won. Erica and Bettina were shocked. The decision seemed impossible to them. Erica looked again at the draw blood evidence. Besides the insistence that I had proof of identification, they also, as an added precaution, took my picture and enclosed it with the blood sample. Erica got her hands on that picture and stared at it. "Es ist nicht. This is not him," she shouted. "It is not him." She said that I looked a lot like Paul, but claimed their court was conned by an imposter. The head shape was not as she remembered him. Mine is longer. Then they examined my signature. The wrong slant tipped someone off that it was made by a right-handed man, but Erica recalled that Paul was a lefty. They took my signature to a Beatles museum where each of the Beatles autographs were on display. Again, there was a big fuss because they did not match. To Erica and Bettina, that proved that Paul fraudulently sent an imposter to go and donate his blood for him. That is how she made sense of the whole thing, knowing Paul was the father. Erica and Bettina were both positive Paul was the father. Now, with my wrongly shaped head and right-handed signatures, and since they say they can prove that Paul's autograph in the museum is not the same as my signature on the blood-drawn sheet, Bettina says she has evidence of my fraud. She only has begun to fight. She is now in her 40s and is attempting to sue me for fraud. I cannot make her understand unless Bettina reads this underground book, because I cannot tell her about her father's accident. If she wants McCartney's DNA, she would have to get it from Mike. As kind-hearted as I am, I would love to tell her all about it, but cannot. On the other hand, Mike is not eager to become involved either. Just gotta check if I gotta... No, okay. Okay, I'm gonna finish this chapter and that's gonna be it for today. Okay. Why should he be? Okay. On the other hand, Mike is not eager to become involved either. Why should he be? He is not the one being accused. I am. It's between me and Bettina now. I will let DNA do the talking. I could bring 100 people to the court who would swear that I am Sir Paul McCartney. Then, in front of everyone, I could wield my arm and let them draw another vial of blood, letting my reputation and all my wealth that it will be the same as the sample I gave the last time. My DNA has not changed one bit since then, unless he took the COVID vaccine, and then it has changed, because those are DNA changers. Okay. That theoretical appearance... My DNA has not changed one bit since then. That theatrical appearance should settle it all at last. With whom the fine people of Germany are messing, they have no idea. This is not the only paternity test that my DNA has cleared for Paul. So a lot of people tried to sue him that said they were which were probably Paul's children, but they're not this Paul McCartney, because this Paul McCartney is that, not the other Paul McCartney. Those are just stage names for a grand drama that I'll read about later when you guys come back to this reading. That's chapter 4. I'm going to read chapter 5, Drive My Car Backwards, in the next edition. I'm going to slowly upload all these to Rumble. I might upload a few of them to YouTube. The ones that I don't just say what I said at the end, because they'll take it down for so-called medical misinformation, which it's not, which they can't claim anything I've ever said is medical misinformation. All they say is that they claim an independent person says it is, but they never say what they're claiming is misinformation, because they know there is no misinformation. They're just lying to you. Just like Chat GPT did to me every time I asked them about whether all the vaccines have ever been tested. They couldn't name one scientific test that's ever been done on any vaccines, because there are none. There are no studies that ever show that any pre-licensed trial has ever been conducted with a double-blind placebo test before licensing long-term of any gotta get my Mexican hat on for this one. Get the Mexican songs going. Someone stole my mariachi hat last night at the drum circle. Some cute Latina girl. She's like, "No, this is my hat, Essie." I'm like, "Okay, Essie, you can have it, Essie, because you're cute." But anyway, she said she'd bring it back next week, but she probably won't. But anyway, I got another Mexican hat. I got to get another mariachi hat next time. So what was I saying before? Oh, yeah. ChatGPT. Go back and watch my videos and go back and look at my comments. They lie to you over and over. So don't believe anything ChatGPT says. They're only going to give you what Bill Gates wants you to know, because Bill Gates is the main funder of ChatGPT. And Bill Gates is a lying sack of shit who's never produced one evidence in any scientific journal or scientific study that any of his vaccines are safe and effective, because none of them are, because all the studies that have been done have proved that they aren't. All right. Thank you very much. Peace out.